The headlights carved twin paths through falling snow, each flake caught momentarily in the beams before vanishing into the gathering dark. Cole Harper's hands rested loose on the wheel of his '98 F-150, the truck's engine producing that particular rattle that had become familiar over 16 years of Montana winters. The digital clock on the dash read 4:47 p.m., but the sky had already surrendered to February's early nightfall. He was 3 miles from home when he saw it. The SUV lay on its side like a wounded animal passenger door, pointing skyward, wheels still spinning lazily in the cold air. Fresh tire tracks carved erratic lines across both lanes before disappearing over the embankment. The vehicle was silver, maybe a Toyota recent model. Steam rose from somewhere beneath the crumpled hood. Cole's foot found the brake without conscious thought, muscle memory from a lifetime of responding to crisis. The F-150 slowed, stopped hazard lights clicking into their rhythmic pulse. He sat there for 3 seconds, hands still on the wheel, watching the SUV's wheels gradually lose momentum. In the back seat, Sarge lifted his head. The German shepherd's ears swiveled forward, dark eyes fixed on the wreckage. 7 years old, scarred along the left flank from shrapnel that had ended his military career, the dog possessed an alertness that age and injury had never diminished. His breathing remained steady. No whine, no bark, just attention. Cole reached for the door handle, then stopped. The radio mounted under the dash crackled with the evening weather report, a woman's voice reciting numbers that meant nothing good. Storm system moving faster than predicted, visibility dropping, wind chill approaching -20, road closures expected within the hour. He looked at the phone mounted to his dashboard. No signal. Out here, 18 miles from Greystone, the mountains swallowed everything the cell towers tried to send. The truck's heater blew warm air that smelled faintly of antifreeze and old coffee. Cole had a frozen lasagna waiting at home, the kind that took 45 minutes in the oven. He had dry socks and a wood stove that he'd loaded with split pine that morning. He had a bottle of bourbon in the kitchen cabinet that he hadn't opened in 3 weeks, a small victory he'd stopped counting days for. He had no obligation to whatever waited inside that overturned SUV. The wind gusted, rocking the F-150 slightly. More snow spiraled across the road, already beginning to fill the tire tracks. In another 20 minutes there would be no evidence anyone had passed this way. Cole pulled the Glock 19 from the glove box, checked the magazine by habit, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Not because he expected trouble, because 23 years in the army had taught him that preparation and paranoia looked identical until the moment they didn't. "Stay," he told Sarge, then stepped out into the wind. The cold hit like a physical thing, stealing breath, finding every gap in his clothing. Cole hunched his shoulders and moved toward the SUV boots, crunching through snow that had already accumulated 3 inches since morning. His breath formed clouds that the wind tore apart before they could fully form. Up close, the damage looked worse. The entire driver's side was crumpled. The door bent inward at an angle that spoke of significant force. The windshield had spiderwebbed but held. One headlight still burned, casting a crooked beam across the ditch. No airbags deployed. Older model than he'd thought, or someone had disabled the system. Cole circled the vehicle, footsteps loud in the winter silence. On the passenger side, he found the first blood. Dark droplets in the snow already freezing, forming a trail that led away from the wreck toward the tree line 50 yards distant. He stopped, one hand moving unconsciously toward the pistol in his pocket. The trail was fresh, maybe 15 minutes old. The blood drops were spaced wide apart, suggesting someone moving under their own power but injured. The tracks staggered, weaving slightly. One set of footprints, human adult-sized. Behind him, Sarge barked once, sharp, insistent. Cole turned. The dog stood in the truck's open door, front paws on the running board, entire body rigid with attention. His gaze fixed not on the blood trail, but on something deeper in the trees, 40 degrees left of where the footprints led. "What have you got, boy?" Sarge's tail remained motionless. His ears pressed forward so hard they nearly touched. A low sound built in his chest, not quite a growl, more like a warning to something only he could sense. Cole had learned to trust that sound. In Ramadi, in Fallujah, in a dozen nameless villages where the air tasted like cordite and fear, he'd learned that military working dogs sensed threats before they materialized. Different dog, same training, same instincts bred across generations. He clicked on his flashlight and started toward the trees. The snow deepened with each step, climbing past his ankles, soaking through his jeans. The temperature was dropping fast, that peculiar cold that settled into bones and stayed there. Cole's breath came harder, the altitude and the years both making themselves known. 50 yards became 70. The trees closed in pine and aspen, creating corridors of shadow that the flashlight barely penetrated. The wind died here, blocked by the forest, replaced by a silence so complete Cole could hear his own heartbeat. Then he heard something else. Crying. Weak, almost animal in its desperation. He moved faster, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. 30 yards ahead, the trees opened into a small clearing. The beam found her there, slumped against a fallen pine, one leg bent at an angle that made Cole's stomach tighten. She was young, maybe 30, wearing a down jacket that had split along one seam. Blood soaked her left sleeve from shoulder to wrist. Her face had gone grey, lips already showing the first tinge of blue. She looked up at Cole's approach eyes, unfocused, and said something he couldn't make out, but his attention had already moved past her. There were arranged in the snow beside her body 6 shapes, small, dark against the white. Puppies, he realized. German shepherds, maybe a week old, maybe 2. Their eyes were still closed. Their tiny bodies lay motionless, belly up in the killing cold. And there, 3 feet away, the mother. A German shepherd, full grown, lying on her side. Dead. Frozen solid, her fur rimed with ice. Cole knelt beside the woman, training taking over. ABC, check airway breathing circulation. Her airway was clear, but her breathing came shallow, rapid. Her pulse fluttered against his fingers when he pressed them to her throat, too fast, too weak. "Can you hear me?" His voice came out rougher than intended. "What's your name?" Her eyes tried to focus on him. Her lips moved. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Chen." The name hit Cole like a fist to the chest. Chen. Corporal Marcus Chen had been his handler in Iraq, the 23-year-old kid from San Francisco who'd adopted Sarge as a puppy, who'd trained him to detect IEDs, who'd saved Cole's life twice before a roadside bomb took him apart in a marketplace in Mosul. Marcus Chen, who'd come home broken, who'd fought the darkness for 7 years before his sister found him in his apartment with a bottle of pills and a note that said simply, "I'm sorry." Cole looked at the woman again, seeing it now. The shape of her face, the set of her eyes. Marcus had shown him a pictures once, his baby sister, the college student who wanted to be a vet. "Marcus," Cole said. "Corporal Chen, he was your brother." She blinked, confusion and hope fighting through the hypothermia. You knew him." "I served with him. I'm Cole Harper." Something changed in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or just the relief of not dying alone. "The puppies," she managed. "They're his, Sarge's, military breeding program. I was taking them to sanctuary. Accident. I tried to save them. Mother was already—" Her words dissolved into shivering so violent her teeth clacked together. Cole turned his flashlight on the puppies. 6 fragile forms, perfectly still. He moved closer, reaching out to touch the nearest one. The fur was cold, but not frozen. Not yet. As his fingers made contact, the puppy twitched. Just once, barely perceptible. A shudder that rippled along its tiny flank before stillness returned. Cole's heart kicked against his ribs. He looked at Sarah, at the 6 puppies, at the frozen mother who had given everything trying to keep them warm. He looked at his watch, 5:03 p.m. The temperature gauge on his keychain read -12 and falling. The math was simple and brutal. Sarah needed a hospital, needed it fast, or she'd lose the leg if not her life. The nearest hospital was in Billings, 43 miles away. The roads were already dangerous and getting worse. The puppies needed warmth, needed it immediately, or they'd all be dead within the hour. He couldn't carry both. The flashlight beam swept across the clearing one more time, illuminating the scene in stark detail. Sarah's blood dark against the snow, the dead mother's open eyes, the puppies arranged like they were sleeping, just sleeping, though Cole knew better. Somewhere in the distance, Sarge barked again, urgent now, demanding. Cole made his decision. He pulled off his jacket, wrapping it around Sarah's shoulders. "I'm getting you out of here. The puppies too. But I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that?" She nodded, the movement small and uncertain. Cole gathered the puppies, handling each one with a gentleness that felt strange in his scarred hands. He placed them inside his thermal shirt against his chest, their compact forms cold enough to make him gasp. 2 in front, 2 against his ribs, 2 tucked near his belt. He pulled his outer shirt closed, then retrieved his jacket from Sarah. Then he lifted her. She couldn't have weighed more than 120, but the snow made every step a battle. His knee, the one that still carried shrapnel from Kandahar, began screaming before he'd gone 10 yards. He didn't stop. The walk back to the truck took 7 minutes that felt like 70. Cole's vision narrowed to the next step, then the next, his breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to ice in his beard. Sarah passed out somewhere around the halfway point, her body going limp in his arms. Sarge met them at the tree line, pressing close to Cole's leg, his warmth a small comfort. Together, they crossed the remaining distance to the F-150. Cole laid Sarah across the bench seat, then reached inside his shirt and extracted the puppies one by one. They were still motionless, their chests rising and falling in breaths so shallow he had to watch carefully to confirm they weren't dead. He counted as he placed them on the seat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All accounted for. Sarge jumped in without prompting, positioning himself near them. Cole started the engine, cranked the heat to maximum, and began driving. The phone showed no signal. The radio offered only static and the weather report, which had graduated from warning to emergency. Roads closing, travel not advised, shelter in place. He drove anyway. The cabin appeared out of the snow like a memory made solid. Cole had inherited it from his parents 12 years ago, when cancer took his father and grief took his mother 6 months later. It sat at the end of 3 miles of unpaved road surrounded by pine forest and silence. He'd been meaning to sell it for 3 years. Getting Sarah inside required another battle with the cold and his failing knee. He laid her on his bed, the only bed, and piled every blanket he owned on top of her. The cabin's interior temperature hovered around 45 degrees, the wood stove having burned down to coals hours ago. Cole fed the stove with kindling and dry pine, nursing the coals back to flames, adding larger pieces once the fire caught. Heat began spreading through the single room, slow but steady. Then he turned his attention to the puppies. He arranged them on a folded quilt near the stove, close enough for warmth, but not so close they'd overheat. 6 little bundles, 3 dark, 2 tan, 1 with unusual white markings on its chest. Their eyes remained closed. Their breathing came shallow and irregular. Sarge approached slowly, sniffing each puppy in turn. His tail normally still gave a single wag. Then he lay down beside them, curving his body around the pile, adding his warmth to the cabins. Cole watched this for a long moment, something tight in his chest, loosening slightly. Sarah stirred a moan escaping her lips. Cole checked her vitals again. Pulse still fast but stronger, breathing more regular. The colour was returning to her face in patches. She'd live, probably. The leg was another question. He'd done what he could with the splint, but that bone needed surgery. He picked up his phone. Still no signal. The wind hammered the cabin's walls, finding every crack and gap. Snow hissed against the windows. The temperature gauge outside read -17. They were stuck here until morning at the earliest, possibly longer depending on the storm. Cole pulled the only chair in the cabin closer to the stove and sat down. His body ached in places he'd forgotten existed. His knee throbbed with each heartbeat. His hands, finally warming, burned as circulation returned. He looked at Sarah sleeping fitfully under the pile of blankets, at Sarge curled around 6 puppies who shouldn't have survived but had, at the cabin that had been nothing but a reminder of loss for years, now suddenly full of life that needed him. The Glock sat on the table where he'd placed it next to his keys and wallet. Also on the table the bottle of bourbon he'd left there 3 weeks ago. He looked at it for a long time. Then he stood, walked to the kitchen and put on coffee instead. At midnight, the smallest puppy stopped breathing. Cole had been dozing in the chair, jerking awake every 20 minutes to check on Sarah and add wood to the fire. Sarge's sudden movement brought him fully alert. The dog had lifted his head and was nudging one of the puppies with his nose, a low whine building in his throat. The puppy was a female, the one with white markings. She lay on her back, tiny paws curled inward, perfectly still. Cole knelt beside her, his joints protesting. He picked her up, her body no bigger than his palm, and felt for a heartbeat. Nothing. He brought her close to his face, watching for the rise and fall of her chest. Nothing. 23 years as an army medic, he'd learned to recognize death in its many forms. This was one of them. But he'd also learned that sometimes the line between death and life was thinner than people thought. He placed 2 fingers on either side of the puppy's chest and pressed gently, rhythmically. 15 compressions, then he covered her tiny muzzle with his mouth and breathed, careful not to use too much pressure. Her lungs were the size of grapes. Nothing. Again. Compressions. Breath compressions. Breath. Nothing. In Ramadi, he'd brought back a 19-year-old private who'd stopped breathing for 4 minutes. In Kandahar, a local girl, maybe 6 years old, caught in crossfire. In a dozen other places, he tried not to remember he'd fought this same battle against the nothing. Sometimes he won. He kept going. His fingers cramped. His back screamed. The puppy remained still. "Come on," he heard himself whisper. "Come on." Behind him, Sarah stirred. "What's happening?" Cole didn't answer. Compressions breath, compressions breath. "Please," Sarah said, and there was something in her voice that made Cole's hands move faster. The puppy convulsed, once violent enough that Cole nearly dropped her. Then she gasped a sound like tissue paper tearing and her chest began to move. Cole held her for a full minute, feeling the flutter of her heart against his palm before placing her back beside Sarge. The dog immediately began licking her rough tongue, cleaning her face, stimulating circulation. When Cole finally looked up, Sarah was watching him, tears tracking down her face. "Thank you," she said. Cole nodded, unable to speak. He returned to his chair. His fingers wouldn't stop trembling. At 2 a.m. his phone flickered to life with a single bar of signal. Cole grabbed it, dialed 911 and got through on the 4th try. "What's your emergency?" "I have an injured woman, compound fracture to the left leg, possible hypothermia. 6 newborn puppies, German shepherds in distress. Location is 2847 Blacktail Road, 18 miles north of Greystone." There was a pause. "Sir, all rescue operations are suspended due to weather. Can the injured party survive until morning?" Cole looked at Sarah. Her colour was better now, her breathing steady. The bleeding had stopped. "Yes. We'll have someone there at first light. Keep her warm and hydrated if possible." The line went dead. Cole set the phone down and added more wood to the fire. The cabin had warmed to maybe 60 degrees comfortable by Montana winter standards. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Sarge hadn't moved from his position around the puppies. All 6 were breathing regularly now, occasionally squirming or making tiny sounds. The smallest one, the one Cole had revived, lay pressed against Sarge's belly, her chest rising and falling in rhythm with the larger dog's breath. "They're his, aren't they?" Cole said to Sarah. "These puppies. Sarge is their father." Sarah nodded weakly. "Military breeding program. They wanted to preserve his bloodline. Marcus arranged it before—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Before he died?" "Yes." Cole watched Sarge with the puppies, seeing something in the dog's posture he'd never noticed before. Not just protection. Recognition. "The mother," Cole said. "What happened?" "She was weak when I got her."
3 weeks postpartum, she should have been stronger, but—" Sarah's voice caught. "The program was being shut down. Budget cuts. I was supposed to transport her and the litter to a sanctuary in Wyoming. The roads were worse than I thought. I hit ice, the car flipped, the cage broke open. She must have carried them out one by one, trying to find shelter. By the time I came to, she was already gone. But she kept them alive long enough for me to find them." "Yes." They sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl. After a while, Sarah spoke again. "Marcus talked about you. In his letters. He said you were the best medic he'd ever seen. Said you could bring people back from places they had no business returning from." Cole's jaw tightened. "I couldn't bring him back. That wasn't your job. He was already gone before you ever got the call. He called me, 2 days before. Left a message. Said he wanted to talk. I was busy."
"I didn't call back." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "He called everyone he cared about. It wasn't about getting help. It was about saying goodbye. If you'd called back, it wouldn't have changed anything." Cole wanted to believe that. Some days he almost did. At 3:30 a.m., another puppy went into distress. This time it was one of the tan ones, a male. His breathing became rapid and shallow, his body temperature dropping despite Sarge's warmth. Cole had expected this. Newborn puppies were fragile under perfect conditions. These 6 had been through hell. He heated water on the stove, dissolved a tiny amount of honey in it, and used a medicine dropper to feed the puppy 1 drop at a time. Too much would cause aspiration. Too little wouldn't help. The puppy's breathing stabilized after 20 minutes. Cole placed him back with his siblings and checked the others. All 6 were showing signs of improvement. Their movements were stronger, their breathing more regular. It wasn't a guarantee. They could still crash, but they'd made it through the worst hours. Cole returned to his chair and discovered he was too wired to sleep. His mind kept circling back to the moment he'd seen the overturned SUV, to the decision he'd made to stop. In the army, they'd trained him to make decisions under pressure, to assess situations quickly and commit fully. But they'd also trained him to understand triage, save the most lives with the resources available, accept that not everyone could be saved. If he'd chosen differently tonight, Sarah would be dead. The puppies would be dead. But choosing as he did meant abandoning everything waiting for him at home. The warm cabin, the frozen lasagna, the illusion of a simple evening where the past stayed in the past. He looked at Sarge, at the puppies, at Sarah sleeping with her broken legs splintered by pine branches and duct tape. Some choices, he realized, weren't really choices at all. The first hint of dawn came at 6:15 a.m., a gradual lightening of the darkness beyond the cabin's windows. The storm had passed sometime in the night, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt almost sacred. Cole stood and stretched his body, protesting every movement. He checked Sarah first. Her pulse was strong, her breathing deep and even. The leg looked bad, swollen and discolored, but she'd make it to surgery. The puppies were all alive, all breathing, tucked against Sarge's warmth. The dog opened one eye as Cole approached, his tail thumping once against the floor. "You did good," Cole told him. "Your boy would be proud." At 7:42 a.m., Cole heard the helicopter. He stepped outside into a world transformed by snow, everything softened and white and new. The sky had cleared to a blue so sharp it hurt to look at. The temperature had risen to a merciful -5. The search and rescue helicopter landed in the clearing 50 yards from the cabin rotors, whipping up clouds of powder. 2 paramedics jumped out, running toward Cole with a stretcher. "You the one who called it in?" "Inside. Female 30 years old, compound fracture, left leg hypothermia, protocol applied." They moved past him, professional and efficient. Cole followed them in, watched them assess Sarah, prepare her for transport. She woke as they lifted her onto the stretcher, her eyes finding Cole. "The puppies," she said. "They're okay. All 6. Can you—" She struggled to focus. "Can you keep them until I can arrange something? The sanctuary, they'll still take them, but I need time." Cole looked at the pile of warm bodies pressed against Sarge. 6 lives that existed because he'd chosen to stop to act, to fight against the cold and the math that said they should die. "Yeah," he heard himself say. "I can do that." They loaded Sarah into the helicopter. Before the door closed, she called out something that the rotors almost swallowed. Cole thought it was "thank you," but he couldn't be sure. The helicopter lifted, banked and disappeared into the morning sky. Cole stood in the clearing listening to the silence return. Then he went back inside. Sarge had moved from the puppies and was sitting by the door looking at Cole with an expression the man had learned to read over 3 years. The dog needed to go out, needed food, needed the routine that kept him balanced. "Yeah, okay. Give me a minute." Cole fed Sarge, let him out to do his business, brought him back in. The dog went immediately back to the puppies, resuming his guardian position without prompting. Then Cole turned his attention to the 6 young lives that had overnight become his responsibility. He had no experience with puppies this young. He had no supplies, no knowledge, no plan. He had a cabin with questionable heat, a truck with a tank 3/4 empty, and $217 in his checking account until disability came through next week. He pulled out his phone now, showing 2 bars, and searched "How to care for newborn puppies." The results were overwhelming. Feeding schedules every 2 to 3 hours, temperature regulation, stimulation for elimination, health monitoring, socialization. The list went on and on. Cole felt pressure building in his chest, the weight that had lived there since Marcus died, since his marriage collapsed, since he'd retreated to this cabin to wait for time to pass. Then the smallest puppy, the one he'd revived, made a sound. Not quite a bark, more like a squeak. She was awake, tiny eyes still closed, nose searching blindly for warmth or food or comfort. Cole reached out and let her smell his hand. She pushed against his palm, surprisingly strong for something so small. "Okay," he said quietly. "Okay." He spent the next 2 hours learning. The phone battery died halfway through, so he plugged it in and kept reading. He learned about colostrum and milk replacement and the importance of maintaining body temperature. He learned that puppies couldn't regulate their own body heat until 3 weeks old. He learned that they needed help to urinate and defecate for the first few weeks of life. He learned that raising 6 orphaned puppies was essentially a full-time job. At 10:30 a.m., Cole made a decision. He grabbed his keys, gently moved Sarge aside, and carefully placed all 6 puppies in a cardboard box lined with towels. He positioned the box on the passenger seat, cranked the truck's heat to maximum, and started driving. Greystone appeared out of the snow like a promise of civilization. Population 847 according to the sign, though Cole suspected that was optimistic. The town consisted of one main street with perhaps 15 businesses, half of them closed for the season. The hardware store was open, the diner was open, and crucially, the small veterinary clinic on the corner showed a light in the window. Cole parked as close as he could get and carried the box inside. A woman looked up from behind the desk. She was in her 70s, tall and thin with silver hair pulled back in a bun and eyes that missed nothing. A name tag identified her as Dr. Martha Wilson. "Help you." Cole set the box on the counter. "Found these last night. Mother's dead. They need help." Martha came around the desk, looked in the box, and her expression shifted from professional interest to something softer. "German Shepherds. How old?" "Week, maybe 2. "Where's the mother?" "Dead at the scene. Car accident. These were with her." Martha reached in and gently lifted one of the puppies, examining it with practiced efficiency. "This one's dehydrated. They all are. When did they last eat?" "I don't know. Before I found them." "That was when, around 5 yesterday evening." Martha's eyebrows rose. "They've been without food for 17 hours. I didn't know what to feed them." She set the puppy back in the box and looked at Cole properly for the first time. Her gaze travelled from his unshaven face to his mud-stained jeans to the exhaustion he knew must be written in every line of his body. "You look like hell." "Feel worse?" "Coffee's fresh. Pour yourself a cup while I examine these little ones." Cole found the coffee pot on a small table in the corner and poured a cup that might have been brewed yesterday but tasted like salvation. He sipped it while Martha worked, watching her handle each puppy with a gentleness that belied her age. After 15 minutes, she straightened. "They're in rough shape, but they'll make it. You did good keeping them warm. Most people wouldn't have thought of that. I've had some medical training. I can tell." She gestured to a small scar on one puppy's paw. "You splinted this." "Was twisted. Thought it might be broken. It's not, but the splint prevented further injury. That's good thinking." She paused. "What's your name?" "Cole Harper." "You live around here, Cole?" "Out past Miller Creek. Inherited my parents' place." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "The Harper cabin. I knew your father. Good man. I was sorry when he passed." Cole nodded, unsure what to say. Martha pulled out a pad and began writing. "Here's what these puppies need. Puppy milk replacer available at any pet store. You'll need bottles, preferably small ones designed for newborns. Heating pad set on low, wrapped in towels. You'll need to feed them every 2 to 3 hours around the clock. Use a damp cloth to stimulate urination and defecation after each feeding. Keep them warm, keep them fed, and watch for any signs of distress." She tore off the page and handed it to him, then added another. "This is my cell number. Any problems day or night, you call." Cole looked at the papers, then at the puppies. "How much is this going to cost?" Martha quoted a number that made his chest constrict. "Initial examination supplies, follow-up visits for vaccines and checkups over the next 8 weeks." The total came to just over $2,000. His disability check was $1,500 a month. Rent on the cabin, which he paid to himself but still had to cover property taxes, was $300. Food, gas, utilities. The truck payment, he was behind on all of it, barely left enough to survive. "I can't afford that." "Can you afford to let them die?" Cole looked at the box. 6 young lives that had survived against impossible odds. 6 lives that existed because he'd made a choice. "No," he said quietly. "I can't afford that either." Martha studied him for a long moment. Then she pulled out a calculator and wrote a new number. "This is what I charge, friends. You pay when you can. No interest." The new total was $1,200. Still impossible, but less impossible. "Why? Because I knew your father, and because anyone who'd drive through a blizzard to save 6 puppies deserves a break, and because—" She hesitated. "Because that's a military working dog in your truck, and I worked with the MWD program for 20 years. I know what those animals give. Figure it's time to give something back." Cole felt the constriction in his chest ease slightly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You've got 8 weeks of hell ahead of you. 2-hour feeding schedules, cleaning, monitoring the works. Most people quit after 3 days." She paused. "You going to quit?" Cole thought about the question. Thought about the cabin that had been nothing but a box to hide in for 3 years. Thought about Marcus Chen, who'd trusted Sarge to him with his last coherent words. Thought about Sarah, about promises made to the dead and the living. "No," he said. "I'm not going to quit." Martha smiled, the expression softening her weathered face. "Good. Then let's get you set up." She spent the next hour teaching him everything he needed to know. How to hold the bottles, how to check if the milk was too hot, how to recognize signs of aspiration or bloating, how to stimulate the puppy's elimination reflexes, a process that made Cole grateful for his years of combat medicine where nothing was too gross to handle. She sent him home with enough supplies for 3 days and instructions to come back Friday for a follow-up check. Cole loaded the box back into the truck, Sarge watching from the back seat with what looked like approval. The dog's tail wagged once as Cole settled behind the wheel. "Don't suppose you want to tell me what I just got us into?" Cole said. Sarge's tail wagged again. The drive back to the cabin took 40 minutes. The roads had been partially ploughed, but the plough had simply packed the snow into treacherous ridges. Cole drove carefully, one hand steadying the box beside him. Back home, he set up the feeding station Martha had recommended, heating pad on low wrapped in towels placed in a larger box. He transferred the puppies one by one, checking each for signs of distress. They were stirring more now, tiny paws, flexing mouths opening in silent cries. Hungry. Cole prepared the first bottle according to Martha's instructions, testing the temperature on his wrist. Then he picked up the smallest puppy, the female with white markings, and offered her the bottle. She latched on immediately, sucking with surprising strength. Cole watched her tiny throat work, watched her belly gradually fill, and felt something unfamiliar settle over him. Purpose. That's what this was. For the first time in 3 years, he had something that needed him not just to survive, but to live. He fed all 6 puppies, a process that took 90 minutes. Then he stimulated each one with a warm, damp cloth until they'd urinated and defecated. He cleaned them, checked them over, and placed them back in the box, where they immediately piled together in a heap of warm bodies. Sarge approached and lay down beside the box, his presence a constant warmth. Cole set his alarm for 2 hours and sat back in his chair. Every muscle in his body ached. His knee throbbed. His eyes burned with exhaustion. He was asleep in 30 seconds. The pattern repeated every 2 hours for the next 3 days. Feed clean, check sleep. Feed clean, check sleep. The world narrowed to this cycle, everything else falling away. On the morning of the 4th day, Cole woke before the alarm to the sound of the smallest puppy making noise. Not crying. Something else. He moved to the box and found her with her eyes open for the first time, dark and unfocused, but definitely open, looking up at him. He reached down and let her smell his hand. Her tiny pink tongue came out and licked his finger. "Hey there," he said softly. "Welcome to the world." By evening, 3 more puppies had their eyes open. They were getting stronger, more active, their movements less jerky and more coordinated. Cole found himself talking to them as he worked, narrating what he was doing, filling the silence that had been his only companion for so long. The sound of his own voice felt strange at first, then gradually natural. On the 5th day, Martha called. "How are they doing?" "Good, strong. 4 have their eyes open." "And you?" "Still breathing." "That's not what I asked." Cole paused, trying to formulate an answer that was honest without being too revealing. "It's been a long time since I had something to wake up for." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "I'd like to stop by tomorrow. Check on them properly. That okay?" "Yeah, that's fine." She arrived at 10 a.m. in an old Subaru that had clearly seen better days. She brought more supplies, refusing payment, and spent an hour examining each puppy with thorough attention. "They're thriving," she announced. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Cole made coffee while she worked. When she finished, she accepted a cup and sat at his small kitchen table. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "What made you stop that night in the storm? Most people would have kept driving." Cole thought about the question. The honest answer was complicated, wrapped up in guilt and memory, and the face of a dead Marine who'd once trusted him with everything. "I don't know," he said finally. Seemed like the thing to do. Martha nodded slowly. "My husband was like that. Marine Vietnam era. He'd stop for anyone, anything. Drove me crazy sometimes." Her voice softened. "He died 3 years ago. PTSD. Took his own life in the garage while I was at the store. I'm sorry." "Me too." She sipped her coffee. "Point is, I know what that war does. What all wars do. And I know what it's like to watch someone you love get hollowed out by memories they can't escape." She met his eyes. "These puppies, they're giving you something to fight for." Cole looked at the box, where 6 young bodies wrestled and squirmed so much stronger than they'd been 5 days ago. "Yeah," he said. "I think maybe they are." The phone call came on day 8, just as Cole finished the morning feeding. Sarah's name appeared on the screen the first time she'd called since the helicopter had taken her away. "Cole, I have bad news." He shifted the phone to his other ear, watching Sarge nose one of the puppies back toward the warmth of the heating pad. "How bad?" "The military breeding program was defunded last month. I just found out. They're not taking the puppies back. There's no sanctuary arrangement anymore." Her voice cracked slightly. "I'm so sorry. I thought I had more time to figure this out." Cole looked at the 6 puppies, all eyes open now, starting to crawl with more purpose. The tan male, the one he'd brought back with honey water, was attempting to climb over his siblings to reach Sarge. "What happens now? Legally they're yours if you want them. Otherwise—" Sarah paused.
Shelter. Or I can try to find homes, but that could take weeks. You still in the hospital? Rehabilitation centre. The leg's going to need 3 more surgeries. I'm looking at 6 months before I can walk properly. The defeat in her voice was palpable. I can send you money when I can. It's not much, but don't worry about money right now. Focus on getting better. Cole, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm choosing. He watched the smallest puppy, the female with white markings, finally succeed in climbing onto Sarge's back. Take care of your leg. We'll figure out the rest. After he hung up, Cole sat in his chair and did math he'd been avoiding.
The cabin's property tax bill sat on the counter, $2,400 due in 60 days. The truck needed new tyres before spring, another $600. He was already 2 weeks behind on the electric bill, and now he had 6 puppies that would need food, vaccines, veterinary care for at least 2 more months. His disability check was 7 days away. After taxes and rent, he'd have maybe $900 to work with. Not enough, not even close. Cole pulled out his laptop, the one he'd bought 3 years ago and barely used, and started searching. Puppy adoption Greystone, Montana, returned nothing useful. German Shepherd Rescue showed organizations in Billings and Missoula, both requiring applications and home visits. He was still searching when headlights swept across the cabin's front window. A car he didn't recognize pulled into the clearing, a silver Honda with California plates. Sarge's head came up, ears alert. Not aggressive, but watchful. Cole moved to the window and watched a woman in her 50s step out, bundled against the cold. She looked uncertain, checking a piece of paper in her hand against the cabin's address. He opened the door before she could knock. "Help you. I'm looking for Cole Harper. I'm Helen Martinez from the Greystone Community Church. Dr. Wilson told me about the puppies." Cole's guard went up instantly. "She had no right to do that. She thought you might need help, and she was right to tell me." Helen's voice was gentle but firm. "May I come in? It's cold." Against his better judgment, Cole stepped aside. Helen entered, her gaze immediately finding the box of puppies. Her face transformed. "Oh my God, they're beautiful." She approached slowly, respectfully, the way someone familiar with animals would. Sarge watched her but didn't rise, which Cole took as approval. "How old?" "Almost 3 weeks." "And you're caring for them alone?" "Me and Sarge." Helen knelt beside the box, letting the puppies smell her hand. The smallest one immediately tried to climb into her palm. "Martha said you might need supplies. The church has a discretionary fund for community emergencies. We'd like to help." Pride and necessity warred in Cole's chest. Necessity won. "I appreciate that, but I can manage. Can you?" Helen looked up at him. No judgment in her eyes, just honest question. "Martha said the bill for their care is already over $1,000. She said you're paying it off in installments." "That's between me and Dr. Wilson." "It is, but the church's mission is to support people in need. Let us do that." She stood, pulling an envelope from her purse. $500. No strings, no repayment expected. Use it for the puppies or for yourself. Whatever helps." Cole stared at the envelope, thinking about the property tax bill, the electric company's final notice, the truck's bald tires. "I don't go to church." "Doesn't matter. You're part of this community whether you attend services or not." Helen set the envelope on the table. "There's also this." She pulled out a flyer. "We're having a community dinner Friday night, potluck style. Martha will be there, and she mentioned several people who might be interested in adopting when the puppies are old enough. Thought you might want to meet them." "These puppies aren't ready for adoption yet." "I know, but in a few weeks they will be. And finding good homes takes time." Helen moved toward the door, then paused. "My son was a Marine. Iraq, 2007. He came home different. Took him years to find his footing again. These dogs they helped. Gave him something to care for when he couldn't care for himself." She left before Cole could respond. He stood holding the envelope, feeling the weight of bills inside, and wondered when exactly his life had stopped being his own. That night, Cole was heating the evening bottles when he heard a vehicle approaching. Then another. Then a third. He looked out the window to see 3 trucks parked in his clearing. Men were climbing out, and he recognized none of them. Sarge was already on his feet, positioned between the box of puppies and the door, a low rumble building in his chest. Cole grabbed his Glock from the drawer, checked it, and moved to the door. He opened it halfway, the gun held low but ready. "Can I help you?" The lead man raised both hands, showing they were empty. He was in his 40s, stocky, wearing an expensive jacket that looked out of place in rural Montana. "Evening. Name's Frank Morrison. We heard you had some German Shepherd puppies. We're interested in seeing them. They're not for sale. Didn't say they were. But in a few weeks, you'll be looking for homes, right? We wanted to meet them early, get to know them. The way they'd shown up unannounced, 3 of them. The way they'd parked, blocking his truck. In the way they were already moving toward the cabin despite his clear reluctance. None of it felt right. Sarge's rumbling grew louder. I appreciate the interest, but now's not a good time. The second man, younger, stepped closer. Just a quick look. Won't take 5 minutes. I said no. The tension crystallized in the cold air. The 3 men exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Morrison pulled out a wallet, extracting bills. Look, we know these are military bloodline dogs. German shepherds from MWD stock. Those go for premium prices. We're prepared to make an offer. 500 each, 3,000 total cash right now. They're not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Cole's grip tightened on the Glock. Get off my property. Now hold on. Morrison started. I said get off my property. Next person who takes a step toward this cabin, I'm calling the sheriff. For what? We're just trying to do business. But Morrison was backing toward his truck now, the other 2 following. They climbed into their vehicles, engines starting. Before pulling out, Morrison leaned out his window. You're making a mistake. Those dogs are worth money. Real money. People will come looking. The threat was barely veiled. Cole said nothing, just watched them drive away. When the sound of their engines finally faded, he went inside and locked the door. His grip was unsteady, adrenaline flooding his system with nowhere to go. Sarge pressed against his leg a solid warmth. Cole reached down and scratched behind the dog's ears. Yeah, he said quietly. I know. He called Martha 20 minutes later. Did you send 3 men to my cabin? What, no? I mentioned at church that you had puppies, but I didn't give anyone your address. Concern sharpened her voice. Who came? Cole described them. Martha was silent for a long moment. Frank Morrison. I don't know him. None of those names sound familiar? Another pause. What did they want? To buy the puppies. Offered 3,000 cash. For 6 puppies barely 3 weeks old. Martha's voice went flat. Cole, that's not right. Nobody pays that much unless they're not planning to keep them as pets. Dogfighting, or breeding mills, or both. Martha cursed a rarity. You need to call the sheriff. And tell him what 3 guys showed up and offered to buy puppies. That's not illegal. It is, if they come back and try to take them. Cole looked at the box, where 6 young bodies slept, oblivious to the danger circling them. I'll keep watch. I'm calling Sheriff Davies anyway. He should know. Martha hesitated. Cole, maybe you should bring the puppies to town. Stay at my place for a few days. You'd be safer. I'm not running. This isn't about pride. Those men! I said I'm not running. I'll handle it. He hung up before she could argue further. That night, Cole didn't sleep. He sat in his chair with the Glock on the table beside him, watching the windows, listening for engines that didn't come. Sarge stayed alert, too, positioned near the door ears, tracking every sound from the forest. The puppies slept in their box completely unaware that the world had suddenly become more dangerous. At 3 a.m., Cole's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Still interested in those dogs? Name your price. He deleted it without responding. At 3:47 a.m., another text. You can't watch them forever. Cole set the phone down and checked the Glock's magazine for the 3rd time that night. Morning came grey and cold. Cole fed the puppies on schedule, his movements mechanical, his attention divided between the task and the windows. Around 10 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser pulled into the clearing. Cole recognized Sheriff Bill Davies, a man in his 60s who'd held the job for 20 years and looked tired enough to retire. Morning, Cole. Martha called me. Said you had some trouble yesterday. Cole gave him the details, including the texts. Davies wrote everything in a small notebook, his expression neutral. Frank Morrison. I'll run that name. See what comes up. He closed the notebook. In the meantime, you see them again, you call immediately. Don't engage. And if they don't give me time to call... Davies met his eyes. Montana's a stand-your-ground state. You're within your rights to defend yourself and your property. But Cole, 3 against 1, those aren't good odds. Even for someone with your training? I've had worse. I'm sure you have. But you're not in a war zone anymore. You've got options here. Davies gestured toward the cabin. Martha offered to keep the puppies at her clinic. Better security closer to town. No. She figured you'd say that. Davis sighed. Stubborn runs in your family. Your daddy was the same way. After the sheriff left, Cole made a decision. He couldn't watch the cabin 24/7, couldn't survive on adrenaline and no sleep indefinitely. He needed help, even if asking for it felt like swallowing glass. He drove to town that afternoon, puppies secured in their box in the truck's cab, Sarge riding shotgun. The veterinary clinic was quiet when he entered. Martha looked up from her computer, surprise crossing her face. Didn't expect to see you today. Need to talk. She gestured to her office, and Cole carried the box inside. Once the door was closed, he said, "Those men who came yesterday, they texted me last night. Twice." He showed her the messages. Martha's jaw tightened. "You should be scared." "I am." "Good. Fear keeps you smart." She leaned back in her chair. "What do you need?" "Information." "Why would someone pay $3,000 for 6 puppies that aren't even weaned? Military working dog bloodlines are valuable. Sarge's genetics, his proven service record that makes his offspring worth more on the black market than most people realize." Martha pulled up something on her computer. "There's an underground network that breeds fighting dogs. They look for aggressive bloodlines, high pain tolerance, strong prey drive. German Shepherds from MWD stock. Check all those boxes." "Sarge isn't aggressive." "No, but he was bred and trained to be protective to engage threats. That's in his DNA, and it passes to his offspring." Martha turned the screen toward Cole. "I did some research after you called. 3 months ago, 2 German Shepherds disappeared from the county shelter. Young adults, both with working dog backgrounds. Sheriff investigated but never found them." Cole felt cold settling in his chest. "You think those men took them?" "I think it's a strong possibility, and I think they've now identified 6 more dogs they want." Martha closed her laptop. "Cole, you need to seriously consider moving these puppies somewhere safer. My clinic has an alarm system cameras. They know about your clinic. If they came looking for information, they know you're connected to me. Then what's your plan? Sit in your cabin with a gun and hope they don't come back." Cole looked at the box of puppies. The smallest one, the fighter, was awake and trying to crawl out. He picked her up, felt her heartbeat against his palm. "I need to find them homes. Fast. Before those men make another move." "You just said they're not ready for adoption?" "They're not. But in 2, maybe 3 weeks, they could be. If I can find families now, good families, I can transition them quickly when the time comes." Cole looked at Martha. "That community dinner Helen mentioned. Friday night. I'll go. Meet people. See who might be suitable." Martha studied him for a long moment. "You're really doing this? Giving them all up? Keeping them means putting them in danger. Those men want 6 puppies. They'll try for 6 puppies. But if the puppies are spread across 6 different homes..." Cole shrugged. "Harder target. Smart. Tactical thinking." Martha nodded slowly. "All right. Friday night I'll introduce you around. But Cole, you can't just hand these puppies to anyone. They need proper homes, people who understand what they're getting." "I know. Do you?" "Because I've seen this before. Someone gets desperate, makes bad choices, and the animals suffer." Her voice softened. "Your heart's in the right place, but placement takes time. Time's something I might not have." That night, Cole set up a security system, using what he had available, empty cans on strings across the approaches to the cabin motion sensor lights he'd bought years ago, and never installed the old trail camera from his father's hunting days, positioned to cover the driveway. It was primitive, but it would give him warning. Friday came. Cole dressed in his least worn jeans and a flannel shirt that didn't have stains. He left the puppies with enough food and water for 3 hours, positioned Sarge on guard, and drove to town. The community center was packed, maybe 60 people crammed into a space meant for 40. Helen spotted him immediately and waved him over. "You came, I wasn't sure you would." "Said I would." She introduced him to what felt like half the town. Names blurred together, Betty and John, something the Robertsons, a young couple whose names Cole forgot immediately. Everyone was friendly curious about the puppies, asking questions he answered with increasing discomfort. Then Martha appeared at his elbow with a woman in her 60s. "Cole, this is Ruth Patterson. She lost her husband last year. She's been looking for a companion dog." Ruth had kind eyes and a handshake that was surprisingly strong. "Dr. Wilson tells me you have German Shepherd puppies." "6 of them, 3 weeks old." "I grew up with Shepherds. Had them all my life until George passed. The house feels empty without one." Her voice was steady, but Cole caught the grief underneath. "I'd be interested in meeting them when they're old enough." Something in her manner put Cole at ease. "They need another 3 weeks minimum, but after that, if you're still interested, we can arrange something. I'll wait as long as needed." The evening continued in similar fashion. Martha introduced him to several more people. Then came a family, parents in their 40s with 2 kids, maybe 8 and 10 years old. The Johnsons, dairy farmers from outside town. "Our last dog died 6 months ago," Mrs. Johnson explained. "The kids have been asking for another one. We've got space experience and we're home most days." The children's eyes lit up when Cole described the puppies. The younger one, a girl named Katie, asked, "Can we see pictures?" Cole pulled out his phone showing photos he'd taken that morning. 6 puppies piled together, a tangle of paws and ears. Katie's face transformed with joy. "That one," she said, pointing to the smallest. "She's perfect." Cole felt something twist in his chest. She might be spoken for. The partial truth came automatically. Katie's face fell, but her brother pointed to one of the tan males. "What about him? He might be available when he's ready." By the end of the evening, Cole had potential homes for 4 puppies. Ruth the Johnsons wanted 2, and an elderly man named Walter who lived alone and remembered having shepherds in his youth. 4 out of 6. Not bad for one night. Martha walked him to his truck. "You did good in there." Felt like selling them. "You're not selling. You're finding them families. There's a difference." She paused. "What about the other 2? Cole thought of the smallest one pressed against his leg in the cabin. Thought of the bold, tan male who was always first to explore. "I'll figure something out. You could keep one. Can't afford one. Can't afford to, or can't afford the attachment." Cole didn't answer, which was answer enough. He drove home through darkness, his headlights catching eyes in the forest. Deer, probably, or maybe coyotes. The motion lights he'd installed were off, which meant no one had approached the cabin. Inside, Sarge greeted him with unusual enthusiasm. The puppies were asleep in their box, all 6 accounted for. Everything was fine. Cole should have felt relieved. Instead, he felt the weight of the decision he'd just made. In 3 weeks, maybe 4, he'd give away the first puppy. Then the second. Then the rest, until only memories remained. He sat in his chair, and the smallest puppy immediately woke, crawling over her siblings to reach him. She climbed his leg with determination, making it to his lap, before collapsing in exhaustion. Cole picked her up, holding her against his chest, feeling her heartbeat. "You're making this hard," he told her. She licked his thumb in response. That night at 2:47 a.m., the motion lights blazed on. Cole was out of bed in seconds, Glock in hand. Sarge was already at the door. Hackles raised a growl, rumbling from deep in his chest. Through the window, Cole saw 2 figures moving near his truck. They weren't trying to hide, weren't being subtle. One of them was carrying something, a bag, or maybe a cage. Cole's heart hammered. He grabbed his phone, dialed 911. "Greystone Sheriff's Department. This is Cole Harper, 2847 Blacktail Road. 2 intruders on my property attempting to steal property. Send units immediately. Units are en route. Do not engage, Mr. Harper." He hung up and watched the figures approach the cabin. They were talking to each other, voices carrying in the cold air, but words indistinct. Sarge's growling intensified. The puppies, disturbed by the noise, began whimpering. One of the figures tried the cabin door, locked. Then a light appeared, a flashlight beam searching the windows. Cole stepped back from the glass, positioning himself where he could see, but not be easily seen. The Glock was heavy in his hand. The second figure moved to the back of the cabin. Cole heard him testing the rear door, then the window. His mind raced through options. 2 men at least. Possibly more, he couldn't see. Sheriff en route, but that was 15 minutes minimum. He could barricade himself inside, but if they had tools, they'd get through eventually. Or he could go out there and end this. The military training, whispered tactics, surprise aggression, overwhelming force. Take the initiative before they do. But he wasn't in Iraq anymore. This was Montana, and the rules were different. Stand your ground was legal, but shooting someone for trying to break into a cabin was complicated. Judges and juries and lawyers, all of it messy. The figure at the back window smashed it with something heavy. Glass shattered, tinkling onto the floor inside. Cole moved to the back of the cabin, raising the Glock. "I'm armed. Back away from the building." The figure froze, then retreated into darkness. "We don't want trouble," a voice called. Male, unfamiliar. "Just the dogs. Give us the dogs and we'll leave. Sheriff's on his way. You've got maybe 10 minutes to be gone before you're in handcuffs." Silence. Then, 10 minutes is plenty of time." The smashed window exploded inward as something heavy crashed through the remaining glass. A rock, maybe, or a piece of wood. It landed near the box of puppies, scattering glass everywhere. Sarge barked, sharp and aggressive, placing himself between the window and the box. Cole's training took over. He moved to the broken window, careful to stay out of sight lines, and fired 2 shots into the air above where he'd last seen movement. The gunshots were deafening in the confined space. The puppies erupted in terrified cries. Outside, Cole heard running, engines starting, vehicles tearing away down the driveway, spraying gravel. Then silence broken only by 6 frightened puppies, and Sarge's continued barking. Cole lowered the Glock, his grip wavering from adrenaline. He'd fired warning shots not at people. Legal defensible, but still a line crossed. The sheriff arrived 8 minutes later, lights strobing across the clearing. Bill Davies stepped out with his hand on his service weapon, taking in the scene, broken window glass everywhere, Cole standing in the doorway with a pistol. "They gone?" "Yeah. Took off when I fired warning shots." "How many?" "2 that I saw. Maybe more." Davies surveyed the damage, then looked at Cole. "This is escalating." "I know. You can't stay here. Not with 6 puppies and a broken window in February." Cole looked back at the cabin, at the box of whimpering puppies at Sarge, standing guard over them. "Where am I supposed to go?" Davies was quiet for a moment. Then, Martha Wilson offered to take them at her clinic. State-of-the-art security alarm system tied to the station. Safer than here. Every instinct Cole had screamed against leaving his ground, against retreating. But Davies was right. This cabin, isolated and exposed, was indefensible. For how long? Until we catch these people, or until the puppies are placed in homes. Whichever comes first. Davies softened his voice. "Cole, this isn't surrender. This is tactical repositioning. You know the difference." Cole did know. Knew it intellectually. Emotionally was harder. "I'll need to pack their supplies. Food blankets, the heating pad. I'll help. Let's move fast before they decide to come back with more friends." It took 30 minutes to load everything into Cole's truck. The puppies went into their box, confused and frightened by the disruption. Sarge jumped in without prompting, positioning himself near them. As Cole pulled away from the cabin, he looked back at the broken window, the dark interior, the place that had been his refuge and prison for 3 years. He'd left it before gone to war, and come back, changed. Maybe this time, the change would be different. Martha was waiting at the clinic when they arrived, the lights on despite the 4 a.m. hour. She helped carry everything inside without asking questions, setting up a space in the back room that was warmer and more secure than anything Cole had managed at the cabin. When the puppies were settled and Sarge had checked the perimeter twice, Martha put coffee on. "You can stay here too," she said. "I've got a couch in the office." "I should go back. Board up the window, clean up the glass." "At 4 in the morning in the dark." Martha shook her head. "That can wait until daylight. You need rest." Cole wanted to argue, but exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. He'd been running on adrenaline for hours, and the come-down was brutal. "Just for a few hours. However long you need." He collapsed on the couch in Martha's office, Sarge settling on the floor beside him. The last thing Cole heard before sleep took him was the sound of puppies settling into their new temporary home, their frightened cries gradually fading to silence. For the first time in 8 days, Cole slept without his phone alarm set, trusting someone else to handle the next feeding. It felt strange, vulnerable. It felt almost like relief. Cole woke to the sound of voices. For a moment disoriented, he reached for the Glock that wasn't on the table beside him. Then memory assembled itself, the broken window, the midnight drive, Martha's clinic. He sat up, joints protesting. Grey light filtered through the office window. His phone showed 9:17 a.m. He'd slept for 5 hours straight, the longest stretch in 3 weeks. The voices came from the main examination room. Cole stood his knee, sending sharp complaints up his leg, and opened the door. Martha was there with 2 men Cole didn't recognize. Both were in their 60s, weathered in the way that spoke of outdoor work and hard years. They turned as Cole entered. "Morning," Martha said. "Cole, this is Ray Hutchins and Tom Bradley." Cole's hand moved instinctively toward his hip where the Glock would have been if he were wearing it. Ray raised both hands immediately. "Easy, we're not here for trouble." "You've got 30 seconds to explain why you're here at all." Tom stepped forward, and Cole noticed for the first time the Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, the same insignia Cole had seen on 100 men in 100 combat zones. "We need to apologize," Tom said. "And we need to warn you." "About what?" "About Frank Morrison. He's not who he says he is." Ray pulled out his phone, showed Cole a photograph. "His real name is Franklin Morse. He runs a dog-fighting operation out of Idaho. Been doing it for 20 years. The photograph showed a younger version of the man Cole had met standing beside a pit with 2 bloodied dogs. Cole's stomach turned. "How do you know this?" "Because we're not random strangers," Tom said. "We're investigators with the Montana Department of Justice Animal Crimes Division. We've been tracking Morse for 6 months. He produced a badge. Ray did the same. They looked legitimate, but Cole had seen convincing forgeries before. "Call the sheriff," Cole said to Martha. "Verify their credentials." "Already did," Martha replied, "while you were sleeping. They're legit." Cole studied the two men again, seeing them differently now. The way they carried themselves, the alertness in their eyes, the tactical awareness. Cops, not criminals. You could have led with that information. "We were undercover," Ray explained, "trying to make contact with Morse's network. When we heard about military bloodline puppies being cared for by a veteran, we thought maybe Morse had already made a move. We came to assess the situation, but you weren't home. We never got the chance to properly introduce ourselves before last night's incident." "Last night was Morse." "Yeah. We had surveillance on him, but he slipped it. Brought 2 of his people from Idaho, tried to take the puppies by force." Tom's jaw tightened. "That's on us. We should have anticipated it." Cole felt anger rising hot and sharp. "You knew he was dangerous and you didn't warn me. We didn't know he'd identified your location until it was too late. We were still gathering evidence, building a case." Tom met his eyes. "I'm sorry. Genuinely. You and those puppies deserve better protection." The apology was direct military style. No excuses, no deflection. Cole recognized it because he'd given the same kind of apology himself when missions went wrong and people got hurt. "What happens now?" "Now we move fast," Ray said. "Morse knows he's blown. He'll either run or make one more attempt to grab the puppies before he does. We need to catch him in the act." "Using what as bait? Because if you think I'm putting those puppies in danger—" "No puppies involved," Martha interjected. "That's where I come in." She explained the plan. Morse didn't know the puppies had been moved to the clinic. He'd expect them to still be at the cabin or in transit somewhere vulnerable. The investigators would spread word that Cole was moving the puppies to Wyoming to a sanctuary there, set up a fake transport use decoys and wait for Morse to make his move. "We'll have a full tactical team," Tom said. "State Police Sheriff's Department, us. Morse won't get within 100 yards of any actual animals. And if he doesn't take the bait, then we keep investigating until we have enough to arrest him on other charges. But this is our best shot at catching him in the act with enough evidence to put him away for years." Ray paused. "We'd like your help." "Doing what?" "Being yourself. Scared veteran trying to get the puppies to safety. Morse's people are watching. They'll believe it if it comes from you." Cole looked at the closed door leading to the back room where 6 puppies slept, and Sarge stood guard. He thought about the broken window, the fear in those young bodies when glass shattered around them, the desperation in Sarge's eyes when he'd tried to protect them. "Tomorrow. We need time to set up the operation." Tom pulled out a card. "You'll need to go back to your cabin today. Make it look normal. Pack supplies like you're preparing for a trip. Be visible in town, maybe mention to a few people that you're moving the dogs for their safety." "And you think Morse's people will hear about it?" "Small town like this, information travels fast." Ray nodded. "Especially when it's information people are listening for." Cole took the card, studying it. Montana Department of Justice Animal Crimes Division. A Billings address and phone number. "I want guarantees. No puppies at risk. No civilians caught in crossfire." "You have my word," Tom said. "And I was a Marine. That word means something." Cole recognized the appeal to shared service, the brotherhood that persisted years after uniforms were shed. It was calculated, but it was also sincere. "All right, I'm in." The investigators left shortly after, and Martha brought Cole coffee and a breakfast sandwich from the diner down the street. He ate mechanically, tasting nothing, his mind already running through tactical scenarios. "You don't have to do this," Martha said. "Yes, I do. Why, Ray and Tom can handle it without you." Cole thought about the question. About Marcus Chen, dead from wounds no one could see. About Sarge, who'd survived war only to have his bloodline targeted by men who saw animals as weapons or profit. About 6 young lives that existed because Cole had chosen to stop on a snowy road instead of driving past. "Because someone needs to stand up for them. Might as well be me." Martha nodded slowly. "Your father would be proud. My father would think I was an idiot for getting involved. Maybe. But he'd do the same thing, and you know it." After breakfast, Cole checked on the puppies. All 6 were awake and active, wrestling in their expanded enclosure. The smallest one saw him and immediately scrambled over her siblings, demanding attention. He picked her up, and she settled against his chest with a contentment that made his throat constrict. "Few more weeks," he told her. "Then you're going to a real home. Someone who can take care of you properly." Sarge approached, tail wagging slowly. The dog pressed his head against Cole's leg, a gesture that felt like both gratitude and warning. "I know," Cole said. "I know." He drove back to the cabin at noon, taking the long route through town, making sure to be seen. At the hardware store, he bought plywood and nails. At the diner, he mentioned to the waitress that he was thinking of moving the puppies to Wyoming somewhere safer. Word would spread. In a town of 847 people, word always spread. The cabin looked worse in daylight. The broken window gaped like a wound glass glittering on the floor inside. Cole boarded it up, working slowly, aware that he was probably being watched. He cleaned up the glass, swept the floor, and packed a duffel bag with clothes and supplies. Made it look like he was preparing to leave for a few days. Then he sat on the porch with a beer he didn't drink and watched the forest until the sun began to set.
His phone rang at 6:47 p.m. Unknown number. "Yeah." "Mr. Harper, this is Frank Morrison. I heard you had some trouble last night." Cole's grip tightened on the phone. "That's one way to put it. I'm sorry about that. Those men, they're not associated with me. I'm just a concerned citizen who appreciates good dogs." "Right. I also heard you're thinking of moving the puppies to Wyoming." There it was. The hook baited and set. Word travels fast. "Small town. People talk." Morrison's voice was smooth, practiced. "I wanted to make another offer. 5,000 for all 6. Cash today. You could be rid of the responsibility, the danger, all of it." "Not interested." 7,000. Final offer." Cole felt rage building hot and focused. This man who fought dogs for entertainment and profit, who sent criminals to break into homes and terrorize people, was offering money like that, made everything acceptable. "I said no." "You're making a mistake. Those puppies aren't safe, not while they're in your possession. Accidents happen, houses catch fire, cars run off roads." The threat was naked now, not even attempting subtlety. "Take the money, Harper. Walk away." "Go to hell." Cole hung up and immediately called Ray. "He just made contact, offered money, then threatened me when I refused." "Perfect. We've got it recorded. Your phone's been tapped since this morning." Ray's voice carried satisfaction. "That's conspiracy and intimidation. We're building a solid case." "What about tomorrow?" "Everything's set. You'll leave the clinic at 10 a.m. with a pet carrier that appears to contain puppies. Drive toward Wyoming on Highway 287. We'll have units positioned every 5 miles. The moment Morrison or his people make a move, we close the net. And if something goes wrong, it won't. We've run this operation a dozen times. Trust the process." Trust. That was the word that stuck with Cole as he ended the call. Trust that the investigators knew what they were doing. Trust that the plan would work. Trust that no one would get hurt. He'd learned in the army that trust was earned through action, not promised through words. Tomorrow would show which kind of trust this was. That night Cole stayed at the cabin. Alone, surrounded by silence and the memory of 6 puppies who'd filled the space with noise and purpose. He didn't sleep much, kept vigilant by coffee and adrenaline and the weight of tomorrow's operation. At 4 a.m., his phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Last chance, 10,000. Meet me at the old quarry 6 a.m. Come alone." Cole stared at the message, recognizing it for what it was, an attempt to separate him from the puppies, from witnesses, from safety. Morrison was desperate, moving faster than the investigators had anticipated. He forwarded the text to Ray, who called immediately. "Don't go. He's getting reckless. That means dangerous." "Which is why we stick to the plan. Let him make his move on the road where we control the environment." Ray's voice was firm. "You go to that quarry, you're alone and exposed. That's not tactical, that's suicidal. What if he doesn't show up for the highway ambush? What if this was his real play all along? Silence on the line. Then we adjust. Move the operation up. You leave the clinic at 7 a.m. instead of 10. We'll reposition units, tighten the net. And if he's got people watching the clinic, if he knows exactly when I leave which route I take, then we deal with it. But Cole going to that quarry is not an option. Understood?" Cole understood. He also understood that Morrison was escalating, getting sloppy, and sloppy criminals made fatal mistakes. Understood. He didn't mention that understanding and obeying were different things. At 5:30 a.m., Cole drove to the clinic. Martha was already there, preparing the puppies for their day. She looked up as he entered, taking in his expression. "What happened?" He showed her the text. Her face went pale. "You're not going." "I'm not." "Cole, I said I'm not going, but I need you to do something for me." He pulled out his phone, showed her Ray's number. "If I'm not back by 8 a.m., you call him. Tell him everything." "Back from where?" "From making sure Morrison doesn't hurt anyone else."
Martha grabbed his arm, surprisingly strong. "This is insane. You can't—" "Yes, I can. I'm trained for this. The investigators, they're good, but they're thinking like cops. Procedures, evidence cases. I'm thinking like a soldier." Cole gently removed her hand. "Morrison's at that quarry right now, probably with his people waiting for me to show up. That's where we end this." "By yourself." "I won't be by myself." He walked to the back room where Sarge was standing guard over the puppies. The dog's ears came up as Cole approached.
"You up for one more mission?"
Sarge's tail wagged once slowly. In his eyes, Cole saw recognition. The dog knew. Whatever was about to happen, it would be dangerous, and they'd face it together like they'd faced 100 dangers before. Cole turned to Martha. "Keep the puppies safe. No matter what happens, you keep them safe." "Cole, please." But he was already moving Sarge at his heel, heading for the truck, and the darkness, and the ending that had been coming since the moment he'd stopped on that snowy road. The old quarry sat 5 miles outside Greystone, a wound in the landscape where decades of mining had carved away the earth. Abandoned since the 70s, it had become a dumping ground for things people wanted: hidden appliances, cars, occasionally bodies. Cole parked his truck a quarter-mile away on a logging road that hadn't seen use in years. The sky was lightening in the east dawn, maybe 20 minutes away. He checked the Glock full magazine, one in the chamber, checked his phone, 5:52 a.m., 8 minutes until the meeting time Morrison had set. Sarge sat in the passenger seat, absolutely still, waiting for orders. "Here's how this works," Cole said quietly. "We go in quiet, assess the situation. If it's just Morrison, we can handle it. If he brought friends, we wait for backup." He texted Ray the location and situation, adding, "Give me 15 minutes. If you don't hear from me by 6:15, come loud." Then he pocketed the phone and stepped out into the cold. The approach to the quarry was through scrub pine and rocky terrain. Cole moved the way he'd learned in ranger school, each step, deliberate weight distributed, making no sound. Sarge moved beside him like a shadow, decades of training evident in every precise movement. Light was growing now, enough to see shapes and shadows. The quarry opened before them, a vast pit, maybe 200 yards across steep walls, dropping to a floor littered with debris. And there, parked near the edge, 2 trucks. One was Morrison's, the same vehicle that had been at Cole's cabin. The other was a beat-up Dodge Ram with Idaho plates. 4 men stood near the trucks, visible in the dawn light. Morrison was recognizable by his profile. The others were strangers, but their body language told Cole everything he needed to know: hired muscle, probably armed, definitely dangerous. This wasn't a negotiation. This was an ambush. Cole pulled out his phone, texted Ray. 4 targets, armed, quarry location. Move now." The response came immediately. "En route. 10 minutes. Do not engage." 10 minutes. Cole settled into a position behind a boulder. Sarge pressed against his leg and watched. Morrison checked his watch, then said something to the others. One of them laughed. They were relaxed, confident, expecting an easy payday. They didn't know Cole wasn't coming. At 6:05, Morrison pulled out his phone, dialed. Cole's phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. Morrison tried again, then a third time. His body language changed, tension replacing ease. "He's not coming." Cole heard him say the words, carrying in the morning stillness. "Son of a bitch figured it out." "So what do we do?" one of the others asked. "We go to the clinic, take them by force. How many people can there be? An old lady and a washed-up soldier?" Cole's jaw tightened. They were going after Martha, going after the puppies, and they'd do it in the next few minutes before the investigators could intercept. He couldn't wait for backup. Cole stood Sarge rising with him and walked out from cover. He had the Glock in his hand, but held low, non-threatening. His voice carried across the quarry. "Looking for me." 4 heads snapped toward him. Morrison's face went through surprise calculation and something like satisfaction. "Harper, glad you could make it. Didn't have much choice, seeing as you were planning to hit the clinic. Just business, nothing personal." Morrison gestured to his men. "You bring the dogs?" "No." "Then we've got a problem." "We've had a problem since you sent people to break into my home." Morrison shrugged. "Free market. There's demand, I supply. You're in the way of commerce." "Commerce?" Cole's voice was flat. "You fight dogs. You torture animals for entertainment and profit. That's not commerce, that's felony animal cruelty." Big words from a man who's outnumbered 4-1. 3-1, Cole corrected. "You're forgetting Sarge." On cue, the German shepherd moved forward, positioning himself between Cole and the 4 men. His body language shifted, every muscle tensed, ready. A low growl built in his chest. One of Morrison's men reached for something under his jacket. Cole raised the Glock sighting on center mass. Don't! The man froze. Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You won't shoot. You're not a killer, Harper. I checked your record. Medic right. You save lives, not take them. I was a medic in the Rangers. Different kind of medic. Cole's hand was steady, the Glock an extension of his will. I've taken lives when necessary. Don't make it necessary. The quarry fell silent, except for the wind and Sarge's growling. Cole could feel the situation balanced on a knife's edge, violence waiting to erupt. Then he heard its sirens in the distance growing closer. Morrison heard them too. His expression changed, calculation shifting to desperation. This isn't over. Yeah, it is. The investigators' vehicles appeared at the quarry's entrance, lights blazing. Doors opened, armed officers emerging, voices shouting commands. On the ground, hands where we can see them. Morrison and his men had nowhere to run. The quarry's walls trapped them, the only exit blocked by law enforcement. 3 of them complied, immediately dropping to their knees, hands raised. But Morrison bolted, running for the quarry's edge for some desperate escape that existed only in his panic. Stop! Tom's voice amplified. There's nowhere to go. Morrison didn't stop. He reached the edge and looked down maybe 50 feet to the quarry floor, littered with rusted metal and broken concrete. For a moment Cole thought he'd jump. Then Morrison turned, reaching under his jacket, pulling out a pistol. Drop the weapon! Multiple voices overlapping. Morrison swung the pistol toward the closest officer. Sarge launched without command 90 pounds of trained aggression, covering 15 yards in seconds. He hit Morrison at waist-height, momentum carrying them both over the quarry's edge. They fell together, Morrison's scream cut short by impact. No! Cole was running, Glock forgotten, reaching the edge and looking down. Morrison lay motionless on the quarry floor, his body at an angle that meant broken bones, maybe worse. And beside him, also, motionless Sarge. Cole didn't remember climbing down the quarry wall, didn't remember the rocks tearing his hands or the officers shouting at him to wait. He just remembered reaching the bottom, reaching Sarge, falling to his knees beside the dog. Sarge's eyes were open, glassy with pain. His breathing came rapid and shallow. Blood pooled beneath his left side, dark and spreading. No, no, no. Cole's hands moved automatically, checking for injuries, finding too many. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, possibly spine damage. Stay with me, boy. Stay with me. He pulled out his phone fingers, trembling. Called Martha. I need a vet. Now. Quarry location north side. Trauma case. Cole, what? Just come. Tom appeared beside him, breathing hard from the climb down. Ambulance is coming. For Morrison and... Not Morrison. Him. Cole gestured to Sarge. This dog just saved your officer's life. You're going to make sure he gets care. Tom looked at Sarge, at the blood at Cole's expression. I'll make it happen. Martha arrived in 12 minutes that felt like hours. She took one look at Sarge and her face went grim. We need to move him. Carefully. The clinic's not equipped for this. We need to get him to Billings, to the emergency vet hospital. They fashioned a stretcher from a tarp and poles. Lifted Sarge with agonizing care, the dog whimpering with each movement. Cole stayed beside him, one hand on Sarge's head, murmuring words that meant nothing and everything. You're okay. You're going to be okay. We're getting you help. The drive to Billings took 43 minutes. Cole sat in the back of Martha's Subaru with Sarge's head in his lap, feeling each labored breath, each flutter of the dog's heart. Sarge's eyes found Cole's. In them, Cole saw no fear. Just trust. The same trust that had existed between them for 3 years, through bad nights and worse memories, and the slow climb back toward something like peace. I'm sorry, Cole whispered. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Sarge's tail moved once slightly. Forgiveness, or maybe just love. The emergency veterinary hospital in Billings was ready when they arrived, Martha having called ahead. They took Sarge, immediately rushing him into surgery. A vet in her 40s, Dr. Chen, no relation to Marcus, but the name still hit Cole like a fist, explained the injuries. 3 broken ribs, punctured lung, internal bleeding, possible spinal trauma. We'll do everything we can, but I need you to understand the next few hours are critical. Do whatever it takes. Money's not an issue. It's not about money. It's about whether his body can survive the trauma. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but honest. He's 7 years old, previously injured. That makes recovery harder. He's a fighter. Then let's give him something to fight for. They took Sarge into surgery. The doors closed, and Cole was left in the waiting room with Martha, with silence, with nothing to do but wait. Hours passed. Martha brought coffee Cole didn't drink. Ray and Tom arrived, offered updates on Morrison alive, arrested, facing a dozen felony charges. Cole barely heard them. At 2:47 p.m., Dr. Chen emerged. Her scrubs were bloody, her face exhausted, but when she saw Cole, she smiled. He made it through surgery. It was close, but he's stable. Cole felt the pressure in his chest release. Can I see him? Not yet. He needs to stay in ICU for observation, but if things continue improving, maybe tomorrow. Thank you. Thank Mr. Harper. That dog fought like hell to stay alive. He's got a reason to live, and I think you're it. That night, Cole slept in the waiting room, refusing to leave. Martha stayed with him, keeping vigil, saying nothing because nothing needed to be said.
In the morning, they let him see Sarge. The dog lay in a cage surrounded by monitors and IV lines, looking smaller and more fragile than Cole had ever seen him. But his eyes were open, and when Cole approached, his tail thumped weakly against the padding. "Hey, boy." Sarge tried to lift his head. Cole reached through the cage bars, letting the dog smell his hand, feel his presence. "You did good. Saved lives. You're a hero." The tail thumped again. Dr. Chen appeared. "He can go home in a few days. Recovery will take weeks, maybe months. Limited activity medications, monitoring. And he'll never be the same. The spinal trauma has left him with some nerve damage in his left hind leg." "Will he walk?" "Eventually. With physical therapy and time." She paused. "He won't be a working dog anymore. His days of hard activity are over." Cole looked at Sarge, at the dog who'd given everything for him, for strangers, for the mission that lived in his bones. "That's okay.
He's earned his retirement." 3 days later, Sarge came home to the clinic. The puppies, now 5 weeks old, greeted him with excitement that had to be carefully controlled. They didn't understand why the big dog who'd watched over them couldn't play, why he walked with a limp, why he tired so easily. But they stayed close to him anyway, a pile of warm bodies offering warmth and company. Cole watched them together and felt the decision crystallize. He called Ruth Patterson first. "The puppy we discussed. She's ready for placement. Would you like to meet her?" Ruth arrived that afternoon. Cole had thought about keeping the smallest one, the fighter, but as he watched Ruth's face transform when she held the puppy, he knew this was right. "Her name is Scout," Cole said. "She's been through hell and came out stronger." Ruth's eyes filled with tears. "She's perfect." The Johnsons took 2 of the tan males whom Cole had named Duke and Charlie. Walter took the tan female Bella.
A young couple from Billings, referred by Dr. Chen, took the dark male Max. That left 1 puppy. The quiet one who'd never demanded attention, but always seemed to be watching learning. Cole had named her Luna. "I'll take her," he told Martha. "If that's okay." Martha smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that." 2 weeks later, Cole stood on the porch of his cabin with Sarge and Luna. The broken window had been replaced courtesy of Ray and Tom, who'd insisted on making repairs as thanks for his help with the Morrison case. His phone rang. A California number. "Dad, I was thinking maybe I could visit next month. Spring break. Mom said it's okay." Cole looked at Luna wrestling with a rope toy, while Sarge watched from his bed, the old dog's eyes warm with approval. "Yeah," Cole said. "Yeah, I'd like that." "You sound different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Happier, maybe." Cole considered the question. The cabin that had been a prison was now a home. The isolation that had felt safe now felt lonely. The dogs that had arrived by accident had become purpose. Maybe I am. When Emma arrived for spring break, she was 16 and almost unrecognizable tall, with her mother's dark hair and Cole's grey-blue eyes. The first hours were awkward years of silence, sitting between them like a wall. Then she met Luna. The puppy bounded over all enthusiasm and wagging tail, and Emma's careful composure broke. She knelt laughing as Luna climbed into her lap, and Cole saw his daughter again, not the distant teenager, but the little girl who used to beg for a dog every Christmas. "Dad, she's perfect. She's a handful. Can I help take care of her while I'm here?" They spent the week together, Emma learning to feed and train Luna Cole, teaching her the commands he'd learned from Martha. In the evenings they sat on the porch, talking slowly, carefully, rebuilding what had broken. On her last day, Emma hugged him tight and long. "I'll come back this summer, if that's okay." "More than okay." 3 months after the quarry, on a Saturday in late May, they held the opening ceremony for the Greystone Veterans and Canine Support Center. It wasn't much. Martha's clinic expanded with a community room, resources for veterans struggling with PTSD, a network of trainers willing to work with service dogs. But it was something. A start. Ray and Tom came bringing recognition from the state for Cole's role in dismantling Morrison's operation.
The local paper sent a photographer, and one by one the families who'd adopted the puppies arrived. Scout bounded over to Sarge, now walking without his limp, and the old dog's tail wagged in recognition. Max and Duke played together like they'd never been apart. Charlie and Bella explored the new space with enthusiasm that belied their 4 months of age. Cole stood in the center of it all, Luna at his heel, and felt something he hadn't experienced in years, belonging.
Martha found him as the crowd began to thin. Your father would have loved this, building something that helps people. He would have thought I was crazy. Maybe. But he'd be proud anyway. She squeezed his shoulder. I know I am. That evening, after everyone left, Cole sat on the clinic's porch with Sarge Luna and Martha's old collie Blue. The Montana sky burned orange and gold, the mountains sharp against the sunset. He thought about Marcus Chen, about promises kept and debts repaid, about 6 puppies who'd survived against impossible odds, about second chances offered and accepted. We did it, he said to Sarge. We actually did it. The old dog's tail thumped in agreement, and Luna pressed against Cole's leg, warm and solid and real. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, Cole Harper was exactly where he needed to be. Home.